In a realm known as Algard, there existed a formidable sorcerer who had attained unparalleled mastery over the arcane arts. This individual ascended to the title of Demon Lord, casting a long shadow over the battlefield, where countless valiant warriors met their demise at his hands. Each conflict ended in his triumph, as he vanquished nearly every opponent that dared to challenge him. Seated atop the remains of a colossal beast, he pondered aloud the nature of his existence, questioning whether there was truly an alliance among the myriad races, for this monotonous dominance bored him. Suddenly, a brilliant flash illuminated the heavens, capturing his attention. His gaze ascended, and a broad grin spread across his countenance as a host of angels descended, radiating a celestial light. He mused whether the deities had chosen to meddle in the affairs of mortals. Among this divine assembly was an angel with 6 magnificent wings, Michael, the seraphim, who regarded him with a fierce glare, proclaiming that his unchecked reign could no longer be tolerated. Rising from the remnants of his fallen adversary, the demon lord enveloped himself in swirling crimson embers, preparing for what was to come. In response, Michael summoned his own arcane might, and the celestial beings surged forth in a coordinated assault. The demon lord, raising a hand, conjured a brilliant spark above his palm. With a flicker of intent, he unleashed a searing beam of light toward the angels, causing them to momentarily halt in their advance. The beam intensified, erupting in a blinding flash that scattered them like leaves in a tempest. Undeterred, the demon lord pressed his offensive, remaining oblivious to the seraph's stealthy approach from behind, parting the clouds with his divine force. When the demon lord finally noticed, it was far too late. Michael had already conjured a colossal orb of radiant energy above him. With a malevolent smile, he hurled the sphere toward his foe, and upon impact with the ground, an earth-shattering explosion erupted, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The conflict raged for 3 days and nights, a testament to the ferocity of their duel. At long last, the bloodied demon lord rose, panting heavily as he surveyed the lifeless remains of his celestial adversary. A wry smile crossed his lips as he acknowledged his fatigue. Hearing a familiar voice behind him, he turned to see Ishtar, the general of the demon army, flanked by a legion of demons. She greeted him with a knowing smile, remarking on the time that had passed since their last encounter. Upon spotting the fallen seraph, she approached, delivering a swift kick that reduced his corpse to shimmering dust. Sighing heavily, the demon lord inquired as to her sudden appearance. Ishtar cheerfully proclaimed that if they were to engage in fair play, no one could hope to defeat him. She spread her arms wide, asserting that he was weary from his celestial skirmish and that they stood a promising chance now. He remained contemplative in silence, and as the sky darkened ominously, he erupted into thunderous laughter, declaring her assertion a fitting answer. Ishtar, however, noted that he had not changed, asking about his feelings, though she dismissed his reply, claiming he would meet his end like the legends foretold. The demon lord countered with a beaming smile, stating that he felt exceptionally well, leaving Ishtar momentarily perplexed. Noticing her growing unease, he was taken aback, but before he could probe further, she resolutely ordered her army to eliminate him while he was vulnerable. With a snap of her fingers, the demon horde surged forth to attack. The demon lord, with a broad grin, welcomed their advance, arms outstretched, yet before he could react, a monstrous creature severed his left arm, sending it flying. Still undaunted, he retaliated with his remaining hand, striking the beast in the eye, causing a spray of blood to drench the battlefield. Ultimately, however, he was bested, losing another arm and a leg as the monsters closed in, transforming his body into a veritable sieve of wounds. Amidst the cacophony of battle, Ishtar's laughter rang out, reveling in his defeat. Yet, the demon lord contemplated whether she truly believed he could not be reborn. In a celestial disintegration, he traversed the realms and crossed the sea of stars, emerging anew with a triumphant smile and clenched fist in a different world, Tokyo, in the year 2000. On that fateful day, dungeons erupted across the globe. As night fell, a colossal portal manifested above the city, heralding the arrival of a cyclops, which stood amidst the crumbled remains of the urban landscape. Military forces opened fire, yet the behemoth remained unfazed, grinning at the futile assault. A soldier, filled with disbelief, remarked on the absurdity of the situation as tank crews joined the fray. A cloud of dust enveloped the area, and silence fell momentarily. Then, an anxious voice broke the stillness, questioning whether they had succeeded. Relief washed over the civilians and soldiers alike, But that relief was short-lived, as horror twisted their faces when the dust settled, revealing the Cyclops unscathed. Panic ensued, and the crowd fled in terror. Amidst the chaos, a little girl stumbled and fell, catching the Cyclops' attention as it loomed over her, weapon raised in impending doom. In a flash, a man appeared, shielding her just in time. With a deft leap, he evaded the monster's strike and retaliated, cleaving its body in twain. Gently placing the child on the ground, he adjusted his hair, casting a comforting smile her way. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the girl wept as the onlookers erupted in jubilation, recognizing him as an S-rank hunter. While humanity's armed forces could manage ordinary monsters emerging from the dungeons, they struggled against the high-ranking ones. Along with the emergence of dungeons and demons, individuals with extraordinary talents appeared, dubbed the Awakened. Nations instituted reward systems to incentivize dungeon clearing, leading to the formation of guilds and collectives, where wealth and power became the currency of hunters. As time passed, media scrutiny encroached upon the lives of these elite individuals. A boy named Hiro sat in his room, engrossed in news regarding an S-rank hunter embroiled in scandal. Reflecting on the era of hunters, he pondered the implications of talent, noting that abilities often ran in families. If both parents were hunters, their offspring typically awakened their powers at the age of 12, with potential strength and growth rate contingent on their rank. For instance, an A-rank hunter could reach level 99 while an F-rank could only attain level 25. Talent, he mused, was an insurmountable barrier for the unendowed. As Hiro absorbed the broadcast, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside his door, sending a wave of dread coursing through him. The door swung open, revealing a figure calling his name, followed by a brutal assault that left him reeling, his phone crashing to the floor. In this world, there existed two types of people, those adorned with talent and those devoid of it. The assailant was soon followed by another, and together they unleashed their wrath upon Hiro, who cowered on the floor, pleading for mercy. Their laughter echoed around him, taunting his supposed uselessness. They berated him as a parasitic existence, a drain on society, devoid of worth. As the night wore on, the sounds of violence persisted, and the fallen phone flickered to life, revealing an unknown force that penetrated its screen, summoning the Demon Lord application. In his youth, Hiro had shielded his friend from bullies, ready to absorb the blows himself. The purpose of their refuge was to nurture promising children for enrollment in the Hunter Academy. When his friend Yuzuki took the entrance exam at 12, she emerged with an S rank, transforming from a timid girl into a formidable force, fiercely protective of him. As the day of her departure for the Hunter Academy approached, she returned to their familiar spot, informing him that she could no longer shield him. Hiro's gaze fell to the ground, mumbling in despair. Yet, she seized his shoulders, declaring that even the weak could stand their ground if they utilized their intellect. But when her escort called for her, she departed, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Hiro's heart ached, perceiving himself as truly feeble. Time marched on, and he entered the training dungeon designated for beginners alongside children from the orphanage. Before entering the Hunter Academy, all aspirants were required to traverse this introductory challenge. Upon stepping through the portal, they found themselves ensnared in a shadowy cavern. One of the leaders, irritated, announced that rewards would be divided inequitably, favoring their own interests. The team comprised a healer, an E-rank support, and 2 C and D-rank warriors. A swordsman named Ruji asserted that they would not entertain dissent. Hiro turned away, disillusioned that nothing had changed. Just then, a voice broke through the tension, Akiritachi Banu, who boldly interjected, insisting that rewards should be allocated based on merit. A formidable warrior named Takeshi approached him with a menacing demeanor, yet he remained steadfast, exuding confidence even as a flicker of anxiety began to creep in. Without warning, that same warrior struck him in the chest, unleashing a brutal barrage of blows while proclaiming their superiority as seasoned hunters. They insisted that he ought to remain silent and cease any further disputes. The main character, MC, hesitantly stepped forward, urging them to desist. However, he abruptly paused, recalling the wise counsel of his friends, even those deemed weak could retaliate with cleverness. He lowered his gaze, clenched his fist, and confronted the uncomfortable truth of his own inadequacy. Ruji, his ally, wrapped his arms around him, pleading for him to stop. When asked what he meant, he explained that if they continued to pummel him, they would find themselves without a thief, one who could assist them in completing the dungeon. Takeshi, irritated, elbowed Ruji and dismissed Akira with a derisive comment, promising to settle the score after their dungeon expedition. As they delved deeper into the cave, Akira struggled with the aftermath of the recent assault. In one shadowy passage, the eerie yellow eyes of goblins glinted ominously, prompting them to leap from their concealment and announce their ambush with raucous shouts. The group rallied together, leaders drawing their weapons in a show of unity. The axe-wielding warrior swiftly dispatched a goblin, calling upon the support to join the fray. The mage conjured spells that ignited his staff, while the warrior continued to slice through the goblin ranks alongside his comrades, advancing boldly along the narrow passage. Meanwhile, Akira and the MC took refuge behind a large stone, whispering that hunters lacking combat prowess should exercise caution. Observing the skilled fighters, Akira pondered their remarkable talent, a blend of high levels and rapid skill acquisition. The swordsman effortlessly severed the final goblin's head, and the team collectively exhaled, gazing at the heap of slain foes. Immediately, they chided the support for their lackluster performance, questioning whether he could provide proper assistance. They lamented their tardiness, hoping the reward would not dwindle. Hodo emerged from the shadows with Akira, expressing astonishment at the group's behavior. Regretfully, he admitted his inability to aid them while acknowledging the dungeon's inherent dangers, despite its designation as beginner-friendly. He lamented the unfairness of the situation, wishing they could secure the entire reward. His eyes clouded with sorrow as he confessed his desperate need for money. This prompted Hiru to repeat the word money in confusion, to which Hodo affirmed, revealing his aspirations to form his own hunter guild. Nowadays, guilds prioritized wealth over skill, indifferent to the talents of individuals. He lamented the lives that could be saved with potions sourced from dungeons, lamenting that such remedies were often coveted by the affluent while ordinary folk were left to suffer. Hiru, intrigued, questioned him further, and after a brief introduction, they exchanged names, shaking hands in a moment of camaraderie. Suddenly, Arai summoned him, pointing toward the end of the corridor, claiming he had spotted a chest in the cave. Adjusting his gloves, Akira declared it was his turn to investigate. As he approached the chest, his companions urged him to hurry, but he cautioned against haste, wary of potential traps. With a flashlight clamped in his mouth, he deftly began to pick the lock. The warriors leaned against the wall, resting, while one of them queried about any dangerous traps lurking within this beginner dungeon. The healer poured water from a thermos into cups, distributing them among the group. Hiru awkwardly thanked her, recognizing the dungeon's low-risk reputation. Without warning, a piercing scream reverberated through the cave, originating from the chest itself. They turned in horror as 3 weapons pierced the thief's body, blood spurting forth. Gasping for air, he exhaled his last breath, collapsing to the ground. The very earth beneath them began to fracture, leading to a catastrophic collapse, and with a cacophony of screams, they plummeted to a lower level of the cave. Once silence enveloped the space, Hiro cleared his throat, questioning whether it had indeed been a trap. Panic surged as he recalled the absence of his companions, only to freeze in shock at the sight of Akira's lifeless body strewn before him. This was his first encounter with death in the dungeons, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. As dread washed over him, the other members of the group emerged from the fall. The healer approached Hiru, her eyes widening in horror as she beheld the thief's remains. She whispered in disbelief that he was dead. The mage screamed, both of them fleeing in terror. Takeshi, vexed, struck the boy atop the head, causing him to stumble. The healer, alarmed, watched as the warriors admonished them to remain silent, urging an end to the panicked cries. The swordsman, with a sardonic grin, remarked that one person's foolishness had cost a life, yet he suggested they adopt a more positive outlook. The others stared at him, astonished, while Takeshi echoed his sentiment, noting that aside from losing the ability to open the chest, no further issues had arisen. He clapped his hands, urging them to rise, asserting that this incident should not hinder their progress. For a brief moment, the cave lay still, save for the healer's furtive glance at Hiru. Noticing her unease, he felt a chill run down his spine. His attention was drawn to the chest, and one of the warriors proclaimed that the worst had passed. No longer shaking, they simply needed to ascend. With a suggestion to bolster his jump with magic, he called out to Hiru, inquiring if he had brought the rope. After retrieving it and casting one last glance at Akira, he took a deep breath, ready to ascend. They made their way toward the exit, but the mage, leading the group, tearfully questioned why such deadly traps existed in a beginner dungeon. The healer hypothesized that it might be a dungeon paradox, a phenomenon where the dungeon's difficulty fluctuated. The warriors engaged in a discussion, one querying the mechanics of such occurrences, while the healer explained that they transpired randomly every few years. Ruji, with a smirk, suggested it was merely an accident. Hearing this, Hiro felt a shiver run through him, while they continued on, dismissing Akira's demise as inconsequential, labeling him a talentless fool. Fury bubbled within MC as he clenched his teeth, appalled at their callousness toward human life. However, it was undeniable that they were now entangled in a paradox. The healer, walking beside him, suddenly halted, prompting Hiro to inquire about her abruptness. She turned toward him, her expression one of dread, before glancing downward and confessing she might have stepped on something. Moments later, the ground trembled once more, heralding the arrival of bright sparks that coalesced into the forms of monstrous creatures. The boys froze, aghast, as a horde of wolves materialized before them. "Are those northern wolves?" one warrior exclaimed, panic lacing his voice. None had studied these beasts at the Hunter Academy. How could they possibly contend with them? The silver wolves, baring their teeth, advanced with an ominous growl, while Ruji proclaimed that such creatures should not be present in this dungeon. They typically dwelled in the farthest reaches, now inaccessible. The support members speculated on the nature of the trap that summoned these creatures, baffled as to why it would exist in a beginner dungeon. Amidst the chaos, the warriors deliberated their next course of action, realizing that even an attempted escape could lead to their demise. The wolves closed in, their growls resonating ominously, and the dungeon paradox, known as the chain paradox, loomed in the air like a heavy fog, an unyielding series of inexplicable events that altered the very fabric of their reality. Takashi, recalling a crucial detail, turned to his comrades with a grin. "These silver wolves have a unique trait," he stated. The others looked at Hiro, dread dawning upon them, for they had studied the monsters that could manifest in the dungeons. These wolves attacked the weakest member of the squad first. The warriors exchanged knowing glances, their grins returning. They needed to flee, turning to Hiro with urgent instructions. Takashi pointed toward a distant passage, commanding him to run in that direction. Hiro's voice quivered as he questioned whether the warrior was jesting. Takashi remained silent, placing a reassuring hand on the trembling mage's shoulder, informing him he would serve as bait. "If you see them coming for you, unleash your magic upon me," he instructed. Hiro's heart raced, and a plea escaped his lips. This couldn't be real, could it? The mage, with tears in his eyes, expressed his remorse, and as the warriors dashed toward the exit, Hiro could only watch in disbelief, bewildered by their reckless abandon. "Is this a joke?" he called out, desperation creeping into his voice. The healer, paralyzed with fear, stammered her apologies, confessing she had no desire to meet a grim fate. The protagonist was engulfed in a wave of anxiety, imploring his companions to pause. He firmly believed that, united, they could confront the impending threat. They were, after all, comrades. The mage commenced invoking his arcane powers, offering apologies, while the healer, consumed by trepidation, trembled and wept, pleading for forgiveness. Hiro, momentarily paralyzed, pondered the reason behind their contrition. In a flurry, his companions darted past him, and he turned, mulling over their apparent message. It was not his transgression. They all rushed together towards the right passage, and as he extended his hand toward them, he contemplated the unforgiving nature of their world, a realm where the feeble had no sanctuary. Casting aside his backpack, he sprinted, haunted by memories of his friend who once labeled him weak. With every ounce of his strength channeled into his flight, tears streamed down his face. Yet, the wolves outpaced him. One lunged forward, toppling him to the ground. The agony began as claws raked his flesh, and a piercing scream erupted from his lips, blood splattering in a gruesome display. The wolves, relentless in their cruelty, savaged him without a hint of mercy. His vision blurred, and he begged for them to cease, but they were indifferent, dragging his mangled form through the cavern. In that agonizing moment, he questioned whether this was to be his final breath. Flashbacks of his childhood flooded his mind, accompanied by a refrain of self-doubt. Was he truly weak? He longed not to be sheltered but to safeguard others. With tear-streaked eyes, he whispered a yearning to grow stronger. As the wolves gnawed at his bones, his phone dislodged from his pocket and illuminated the darkness. The wolves, sensing the glow, halted their feast, ears pinned back in trepidation. They spat out the remnants of his flesh and fled in terror. Hiro's hand lay beside what was left of him, the screen of the phone glowing vibrantly until a loading screen materialized, signaling that the Demon Lord's application was activating, analyzing Hiro Ima's status. A status window emerged, and the system announced a potent thirst for strength had been detected, granting access to his soul. A radiant spectrum of colors emanated from the screen, enveloping his battered body, activating the Soul Link skill. His health points erupted in a fiery red, restoring to full capacity. The system indicated that 180 seconds remained before the Soul Link skill would reactivate. Moments later, he awoke, all wounds miraculously healed, limbs restored. With a deep sigh, he blinked in astonishment, abruptly rising and clutching his throat, recalling the torment he had just endured. Examining his body in disbelief, he questioned his own existence. Why had he healed? His gaze shifted to the phone at his side. Was this the sole remnant of his ordeal? Staring at the screen in astonishment, he muttered about the Demon Lord application. He had no recollection of installing it. Rising to his feet, he surveyed the pool of blood surrounding him, a visceral reminder of the wolves' assault. Realizing it was his own, nausea overwhelmed him, and he retched. Gathering his composure, he acknowledged that this was no mere dream. Wiping away the remnants of his sickness, he contemplated the inexplicable occurrences, recognizing he was utterly alone, a stark reminder that betrayal was not a jest. He located his boot and slipped it on, resolving to escape this dreadful place. Navigating the passage where his companions had fled, he found himself in an expansive cavern. Venturing further, he stumbled upon a corridor littered with goblin corpses. Instinctively, he concealed himself, grimacing at the realization that his friends had traversed this path. Yet, unbeknownst to him, a living goblin lurked in the shadows. The diminutive fiend lunged with a shriek, revealing its severed arm. Hiro barely had time to react before the creature sank its teeth into his neck. Desperately, he implored it to desist, but the monster, unrelenting, toppled him, gnawing at his flesh. Hiro struck out with desperate punches, but the goblin seized his throat, tightening its grip. Gasping for air, he fought back, grasping the creature's hand and pushing against its head. The goblin, grinning wickedly, relinquished its hold only to rain blows upon Hiro's skull. Goblins, notoriously the weakest of demons, were no match for him, yet this particular monstrosity seemed relentless. The creature pummeled him mercilessly, and in a moment of vulnerability, Hiro's defenses waned. The goblin, sensing weakness, thrust its fingers into his eye socket, drawing forth a scream of agony from Hiro. The app on his phone indicated 10 seconds remained until the Soul Link was reactivated. As the time dwindled, the skill activated, establishing a spiritual bond with the Demon Lord for 24 hours. This connection promised an unlimited bonus upon completion. In a moment of unexpected clarity, Hiro restored his vision, the blood vanishing as if by magic. The goblin, stunned, hesitated, only to be met with Hiro's retaliatory strike, his fingers piercing the creature's eye, inflicting excruciating pain. With a howl, the goblin recoiled as Hiro seized a stone from the ground, rising to face his foe. The goblin cowered in terror, unable to fathom the sudden shift in power. Hiro approached with determination, striking the creature's head with ferocity, again and again. The system chimed, confirming the kill, and Orc was vanquished. Hiro absorbed the creature via the Demon Lord's application, earning a special bonus. His experience points surged, leveling him up to 3 as his health, mana, and strength surged. The realization struck him, what was this system? Pondering his newfound power, he squeezed the bloodied stone, shattering it effortlessly. Stunned, he dropped to the ground, grappling with the reality of his transformation, watching the dust settle around him. Amidst the shadows of the cavern, he pondered whether the stone had indeed been obliterated. This realization struck him as a testament to the capabilities of a fledgling hunter within the Academy's ranks. But where had this newfound strength originated? Glancing upwards at the status window, he queried, "Is this truly accurate?" His attention was captured by a swarm of bats fluttering overhead. With a swift motion, he hurled a stone in their direction, advancing down the dimly lit corridor. As he dispatched the bats with deft throws, a revelation about the system began to crystallize in his mind. Each time he vanquished a specific demon type for the first time, the insatiable skill of the Lord would spring into action. From slaying orcs and goblins, he garnered an increase in strength, while his agility surged upon dispatching the bats. With a decisive strike, he incapacitated the orc lurking behind him, sending it sprawling to the ground. He followed through with a powerful kick, reveling in the thrill of monster slaying within this treacherous dungeon. He soon discovered that each orc and goblin he felled granted him a strength bonus of 1 unit, while each bat enhanced his agility. Skeletons, on the other hand, augmented his magical prowess, and from stone goblins, he gleaned fortitude. A status window flared to life, announcing his ascension to level 4, with health now at 282 and mana at 18. His strength had risen to 10, while all other attributes, save for spirit, had reached 9. He had heard whispers that hunting solo could expedite level gains, yet to have surged 2 levels already left him astounded. Motivated by this revelation, he ventured deeper into the cave, contemplating the duration of the Soul Link skill, which he believed lasted for 24 hours. He soon encountered a chamber adorned with myriad crystals, where a shimmering barrier obstructed his path. Curiosity piqued, he reached out, questioning whether he could breach it without authorization. Peering inside, he recognized that confronting the silver wolves would be inevitable. Abruptly, a system notification materialized, alerting him to a new quest. Upon traversing the beginner dungeon, the challenge would commence in 10 seconds. Surprised, he exclaimed, "A quest?" The system window vanished, and a menacing growl echoed behind him. Turning, he beheld a silver wolf emerging from the gloom, flanked by a formidable pack, their growls reverberating ominously, sending a shiver down his spine. Was this truly a submerged floor of the dungeon? The agility value on his status screen illuminated, indicating activation, as he instinctively recoiled. The wolves advanced, encircling him, and in that moment, he felt the icy grip of dread. He was staring death in the face. A wolf growled, causing him to freeze momentarily before he dodged to the side, narrowly evading a vicious bite. Elation surged through him. His heightened agility had sharpened his reflexes, enabling him to anticipate the silver wolf's movements. He dashed forward, only to find another wolf blocking his path, which he struck with his knee, gritting his teeth in determination. Skipping over the beast, he landed behind it, but as it turned, a blue aura radiated ominously around it. Despair washed over him. He realized he was ill-equipped to handle it with mere fists. The other wolves bore the same aura and closed in, sealing his fate. With nowhere left to escape, he remained paralyzed, watching as they approached with predatory intent. One lunged at him, and he retaliated with a punch, but it crashed into him, pinning him to the ground. Harrod grasped a grim truth: nothing had altered since the last encounter. The pack descended upon him, tearing at his flesh, blood splattering the barrier. They feasted on his remains, yet the Soul Link skill activated, and his health began to regenerate, rejuvenating him just as they consumed his body. His hand, being devoured, disintegrated, while the wolves paused, bewildered, as his corpse rose anew, wounds miraculously healing, limbs restoring. This marked his second death. His body fully mended, he opened his eyes, only to feel himself plummeting once again. Panic surged within him as he collided with the ground, glancing up in confusion. The wolves resumed their assault, tearing him apart once more. The system chirped, announcing that having met the minimum requirements, he acquired a new skill, pain resistance. This skill activated instantaneously, and upon his next demise, the Soul Link skill re-engaged. His corpse ascended once again, interrupting the wolf's meal, who gazed upwards in astonishment as he resurrected yet again. With widened eyes, he fell to the ground, only to be beset by the wolves once more. An immortal body felt more like a curse than a blessing. The wolves dismantled him again, devouring his flesh, while the agony of eternal torment became his relentless reality. Death was elusive, true salvation lay beyond his grasp. His body was shredded, encapsulating the horror of perpetual suffering, yet each demise increased his pain resistance to level 3 and birthed a new skill, fearlessness. This skill dulled the pain, allowing him to endure the sensation of being consumed alive. Revived once more, he landed on the ground, and his first instinct was to strike back. He realized he required a weapon, recalling Akira's corpse amidst the rubble. Horrified yet resolute, he sprinted back to the crash site. There, among the debris, he beheld his fallen ally, lifeless eyes fixed on nothingness, a sword protruding from his chest. Seizing the hilt, he drew the weapon from Akira's body, causing it to rise, extracting the blade from its stomach. At that moment, a furious wolf lunged at him from behind, and with a swift motion, he sliced its neck, the warm blood splattering on his face. A grin crept across his features. He had triumphed. Turning to face the remaining wolves, he proclaimed the commencement of their chaotic skirmish, brandishing the dagger with a renewed sense of purpose. Memories of a hunter's interview flashed in his mind, where the interviewer posed questions about gaining experience. The hunter had affirmed that they could pursue prey solo, opting for stronger demons. The girl had inquired if a student from the academy could triumph over 100 silver wolves, to which he had responded that success would be monumental. Harrod had achieved that very feat. The cave floor lay strewn with wolf carcasses, sweat beading on his brow as he unleashed a triumphant roar that reverberated throughout the confines of the cavern. With the aid of the Soul Link and pain resistance skills, which activated with each battle, his pain resistance ascended to level 5, and fearlessness to level 2. Upon eliminating a silver wolf, he received an accolade, prompting the activation of the Lord's Insatiability skill, which bolstered his strength and enhanced all attributes. He was bestowed the title of Great Hunter for vanquishing a multitude of demons. As he gazed at the status window, numbers shifted, and he stood in astonishment, realizing he had acquired a title and elevated his fearlessness level. The Great Hunter title, an esteemed S-rank designation, was conferred upon those who could defeat demons with a stark advantage in strength. All damage dealt would see a 20% increase, while the fearlessness skill augmented health bonuses by 5% per level and invisible enhancement during calculations of skilled damage. Contemplating the implications, he mused that such bonuses seemed ephemeral. How could one attain level 10 in a mere day? With a weary sigh, he raked his fingers through his hair, cognizant that he still lacked a full grasp of these abilities and should temper his reliance on them. As he scrutinized the status window, an alert icon caught his attention. Curiosity piqued, he clicked it, revealing a new system notification. A limited-time quest awaited him, a challenge in the Great Labyrinth, home to diverse monsters. Would he dare enter the labyrinth, where creatures of the same kind roamed? Yet, the Lord's Insatiability skill would treat them as fresh prey. Surprised at the completion of the dungeon, he reflected on the forbidden area, realizing its connection to other dungeons. Observing the fallen corpses, he acknowledged that he'd grown stronger due to the Lord's Insatiability skill. Feeling rejuvenated, he clenched his fist, testing his newfound power. Glancing up at the status window again, he deliberated whether to accept the quest. Crossing his arms, he frowned, grappling with the notion of the Great Labyrinth, wherein demons possessed immortality and battled him relentlessly. He understood all too well the weight of that experience and felt a resolute desire to avoid such torment again. With these thoughts swirling in his mind, he made his way toward the exit. In an abrupt moment, he was halted by the haunting echo of Yuzuki's voice reverberating within his mind, calling out his name. Instantly, he became paralyzed, memories flooding back of her tear-streaked smile when he had shielded her. Resolving to ascertain the time remaining until their soul connection would sever, he summoned the status window, deftly navigating through the interface. A new system window emerged before him, revealing that merely 18 hours and 32 minutes remained before the connection faded away. With a surge of frustration, he clenched his fist and struck himself squarely in the face, vehemently cursing his own idiocy. "Why must my existence be so wretched?" he lamented, continuing to inflict pain upon himself until crimson droplets marked his skin. He cried out, questioning whether this cruel treatment stemmed from a mere lack of talent. The thought of Yuzuki ignited a fervent outburst. Is this truly just? He pounded his chest, tears streaming down his face, vehemently declaring it all to be a fabrication. As if responding to his anguish, a skill activated, releasing azure sparks that enveloped his form, mending his wounds. Gradually regaining composure, he wiped away his tears, observing his now healed fist. Tilting his head back, he inhaled deeply, contemplating with newfound resolve how he could envision a future if paralyzed by fear. With unwavering determination, he gazed at the system window, resolutely proclaiming his desire to confront the Great Labyrinth. The system acknowledged his aspiration, confirming the acceptance of a temporary task. In an instant, the teleportation process commenced, and his corporeal form disintegrated into minute fragments, vanishing from the dungeon's grasp. Meanwhile, in a nearby refuge, a group of compatriots lounged, indulging in libations. Ruji lifted a glass to his lips, stating that dungeons, regardless of their nature, were almost commonplace. A moment of silence enveloped them until one companion concurred, while another chimed in, jesting that perishing in a novice dungeon required a peculiar sort of bravery. Their laughter echoed, morphing into tales of Herod's demise. How feeble must one be, one asked, to which another retorted that even a child could prevail. A friend approached, pouring more alcohol, affirming that danger was virtually non-existent, even neophytes could navigate it. Takashi, brushing away tears of laughter, urged them to set aside their jests, donning a somber expression. "Truth be told, I feel genuine sorrow for those poor souls," he remarked. The boy, incredulous, offered him a glass, asserting that even the most seasoned hunter would be shaken by the sight of death. Snatching the glass away, he rebuked him for his folly. "By the way, an inspection team from the Hunter Academy is set to arrive next week for training battles," he noted. Takashi slammed his fist into his palm, recalling Herod, inquiring about the fate of that unfortunate comrade. "I pity that kid," he mused, "but perhaps he could be of use elsewhere." Their laughter resumed, the camaraderie palpable. Meanwhile, a notification flickered on a phone resting on the table, indicating that the Demon Lord application was analyzing Murabayashi Takashi's status. He was recorded at level 5, with 137 health and 5 mana. Strength and agility stood at 1, spirit at 3, and endurance and magic power at 6. In stark contrast, the protagonist found himself in the labyrinth, having just been resurrected yet again. The tally of his deaths was indeterminate. No sooner had he regained his footing than a wolf lunged, sinking its teeth into his shoulder. In a swift motion, he pivoted and swung his sword, severing the creature's head. As his wound began to mend, he glanced at the system window, scrutinizing his history of skill usage. Eventually, he reached the final floor of the great labyrinth, where a colossal praying mantis awaited. Entrapped in a relentless cycle of death and revival, he persevered, and after numerous attempts, he triumphed over the formidable boss. A system window materialized before him, and he exhaled heavily as it conveyed that he had conquered all levels of the great labyrinth. Rewards were dispensed, endowing him with the skill Awakening of Mana, elevating his level to 15, health to 476, and mana to 156. While his stats remained largely unchanged, his strength and magical prowess surged to new heights. As the reverse teleportation initiated, he was whisked back to his original world, ascendant above ordinary hunters. Morning broke, and two friends ventured to the restroom. Takashi posed a question about the strange rumors surrounding Herod, to which Ruji replied affirmatively, noting the unlikely survival of anyone from that dungeon. They chuckled, but curiosity lingered. What if he had truly escaped? Ruji dismissed the notion, asserting there was no conceivable way. Takashi, wearing a sly grin, reminded him of their agreement regarding their upcoming duel. Ruji confirmed with a smile, acknowledging that their pact was essential for success. Just then, a third boy emerged from a stall, informing them of a new rule: each hunter could now only partake in a single fight. Their astonishment was palpable. Meanwhile, the protagonist sat cross-legged on the floor of his room, grappling with the obscurity of the day he returned from the great labyrinth. Unconscious at the orphanage gates, he pondered whether it had all been a mere figment of his imagination, the only rational explanation for his current predicament. Reaching for his phone, he opened the Demon Lord application, revealing the status window. At that moment, two possibilities confronted him: either his mind was deceiving him, or reality was unfolding as he perceived it. A loud knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Inquiring about the visitor, he found Ruji on his doorstep, wearing a sinister smile, requesting a conversation. They retreated to a storeroom, where Ruji cheerfully announced his role as the opponent in an upcoming training match. Extending his hand, he requested Hiro's cooperation. Hesitantly, Hiro reached for Ruji's hand, only to realize he had instinctively complied. Ruji smirked, asserting that if Hiro had any prior engagements, he'd be ineligible for other matches. With a firm grip, Ruji began to squeeze Hiro's hand, taunting him to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Yet, Hiro remained silent, surprised by his own reaction. Ruji, perceiving a lack of fear, pondered whether Hiro was truly enduring the pressure. Meanwhile, Hiro's thoughts raced. This man, once a source of dread, now appeared insignificant compared to the Silver Wolves. Realizing his newfound strength, he smirked. Angered, Ruji launched a furious assault, demanding to know what was so amusing. As Ruji's fist approached, time seemed to slow, each motion meticulously drawn out. Hiro, compelled by instinct, took a stable stance, fists clenched, and launched an upward strike that landed squarely on Ruji's face. Blood erupted from Ruji's nose, and as he faltered, Hiro's gaze remained fixed, resolute. As Ruji hit the ground, wiping blood from his face, he was astonished by what had just transpired. Is he truly that weak, he wondered, reflecting on the disparity in their levels. Regaining his footing, Ruji grabbed Hiro's clothes, seething with rage, denouncing him as an idiot and questioning how he dared to strike. His body trembled with fury as he demanded an apology, claiming that if Hiro acquiesced, he might consider forgiveness. Yet Hiro, once cowed, now stood firm, recognizing his own insignificance in this moment. However, he resolutely chose to regain his composure, realizing that losing his temper would render him no different from those who sought to belittle him. With a deep breath, he resolved to avoid conflict. Ruji's ire flared anew as he protested Hiro's calm demeanor in light of the attack. Hiro seized Ruji's hand, squeezing tightly, his gaze unwavering as he advised him to heed caution. Ruji, yanking his hand free, sauntered towards the exit, commanding Hiro to halt. Turning, Hiro asserted that he did not wish to interfere, admonishing Ruji to refrain from troubling him. Bestowing a final confident glare, he departed, leaving Ruji in a state of bewilderment. Soon enough, Hiro returned to his quarters, retrieving the first aid kit. From its depths, he extracted a syringe and, with precision, injected himself in the vein, drawing blood into a test tube. This ritual was a weekly necessity, a prerequisite for verifying his status as a hunter. After this, he descended to the hall where blood was being collected. A man urged him to hasten, as he was the last in line, even before the infamous Franks. Hiro placed the test tube into its designated container, apologizing to the attendant, then made his way back to his room. Yet, an unsettling thought struck him: what if they were scrutinizing the hunter's statuses? Anxiety crept in, gnawing at him with the fear of potential repercussions. Meanwhile, Rue's group had congregated in a single room. The boy attempted to tend to his wounds but was swiftly repelled, indignantly retorting how dare he lay a hand on him. Anger simmered as he proclaimed that no one should even think of touching him. The boy commenced the task of gathering the scattered medicines, imploring him to calm down. Rue, after a brief moment of silence, queried about the source of his strength. Had he stumbled upon some rare artifact in the dungeon? The boy dismissed the notion, asserting that it was merely a beginner's dungeon, devoid of anything valuable. Perhaps, he speculated, something worthwhile had been discovered post-dungeon, as he struggled to conceive any other rationale for surviving unscathed. Takashi emphasized that regardless of the circumstances, they had to confront him. He was embroiled in a confrontation, and they needed to address it. Rue, slamming his fist onto the table, demanded a moment, eager to exact his own vengeance. In a flurry of motion, he lunged from his seat, seizing Takashi by the collar, declaring it was his error that led them to this predicament. Apologizing, Rue's friend released him, reiterating that every hunter's equipment was thoroughly inspected before combat. Even with a rare item, it would be of little use. As he resumed his seat, he ran his thumb over his neck, suggesting they contemplate the matter independently. After all, he was merely insignificant, unworthy of their worry. Rue conceded, though doubt began to cloud his mind. Takashi inched closer, donning a smile, assuring him that once the fights concluded, they would have an earnest discussion with the offender. The room's atmosphere brightened, with others joining in on the sentiment, promising a vigorous confrontation ahead. Meanwhile, in the support center's lab, a technician sat hunched over his computer, scrutinizing the blood samples while indulging in a bowl of noodles. Suddenly, a shocking revelation jolted him upright, causing his meal to scatter. "What in the world?" he exclaimed, eyes widening at the errors populating the monitor. His colleague, seated across from him, inquired about the commotion. He responded, noting some peculiar discrepancies. As she approached, he pointed to the screen, revealing that Ijima had never attended the Hunter Academy, yet astonishingly boasted a level of 15. She leaned in closer, disbelief etched on her face, scrutinizing his photograph. Her colleague, gesturing at the screen, asked if she had heard rumors about individuals encountering a dungeon paradox acquiring abnormal statuses. They compiled a report on their findings, tossing it into the appropriate container. The man mentioned a similar incident occurring in the training dungeon of an orphanage, pondering how to relay the information to the authorities. Just recently, this individual had been a mere level 1, the director would undoubtedly need to revise his schedule. The girl questioned whether they ought to report anything before he entered the academy. Even with an abnormal status, it was not their concern. Her colleague frowned slightly, contemplating her words. She continued, remarking on the odd occurrences attributed to the paradox anyone training at the academy could potentially attain his strength. Moreover, this boy possessed unique abilities, so why dwell on it? Her colleague, excitement creeping into his voice, pointed out the oddity of his rapid ascension from level 1. She turned to him, a smile gracing her lips, asserting that such anomalies were not unusual, especially given the recent upheaval in their world. She gestured toward the monitor, suggesting that this was merely another instance of the bizarre unfolding around them. As the day of the fights arrived, the dining hall buzzed with an excited throng of spectators encircling a single table, their eyes glued to a particular individual, Hiro, who continued to devour bowl after bowl. After finishing yet another serving of rice, he approached the cook, inquiring about more. She remarked on his impressive appetite, questioning if he truly was Hiro. He requested the remainder, and she obliged, returning to the table. A woman approached him, commenting on his hearty appetite, and without waiting for a response, she took a seat opposite him. She asked where such an appetite stemmed from. Hiro, caught off guard, remained silent, pondering if she perceived him as some sort of glutton. Hesitantly, he acknowledged that he hadn't seen her around before and inquired about her identity. With a smirk, she revealed herself as the head instructor of the Hunter Academy, a revelation that left those within earshot stunned. She elaborated, stating she had come to scout new talent for the impending fights, having visited the orphanage annually. She expressed surprise at his inability to recognize such beauty, playfully probing if he recalled his little sister. Hiro's memory flashed to the time she had spoken with Yuzuki right after a bout. The instructor shrugged, indicating that many schools vie for victory, urging him to give it his all. She watched him with keen interest, noting something peculiar. Hiro frowned, scrutinizing her as memories of the demon lord flooded back. Her demeanor shifted when she deduced that he had encountered some peril in the dungeon, questioning whether he had experienced anything out of the ordinary. Paradox encounters often bestowed individuals with unique abilities, and her instincts as a seasoned scout had never failed her. Perhaps he held knowledge unbeknownst to her. Hiro remained reticent, acutely aware that she was an instructor at the Hunter Academy where Yuzuki was currently enrolled. It was only a matter of time before they uncovered his existence. He feigned indifference, asserting that his tale was mundane. Initially pleased that he had finally spoken, her expression faltered when he claimed to be an ordinary hunter with F-rank abilities. Confusion clouded her features as she processed this, and she hesitated, scratching her head awkwardly, admitting she might have overstepped. Apologizing for her lack of decorum and initiating a conversation, Hiro stood, assuring her that it was merely a trivial matter. She implored him to wait, retrieving a business card from her pocket. She explained that although low-ranking hunters often blended in with the masses, they weren't truly alone. Offering her assistance, she encouraged him to reach out if he ever needed help. Observing her kind gesture, he reflected on how the strong in this world treated the weak. Some resorted to enslavement, while others extended a hand in support. As he glanced down at the business card, an uncanny resemblance to Yuzuki flickered through his mind. The time for the fights had arrived, and both spectators and participants filled the training arena. Whispers circulated, suggesting this venue was a testing ground for new military technology, constructed from materials excavated in the dungeons, designed to mimic a combat arena. Armed with a wooden sword, Hiro navigated through the throngs of competitors, eventually finding himself in the waiting area alongside his adversaries. Upon spotting him, they began to murmur among themselves, while the instructor took her place in the stands. Soon, Hodo and Takashi entered the arena, facing each other with tense anticipation. Takashi candidly announced that he would not request mercy in this bout, grinning as he brandished his weapon, ready to unleash his full might. Hiro maintained a stoic demeanor, disregarding Takashi's taunts as he mockingly declared today might be his last. Takashi, with a hint of arrogance, remarked that accidental deaths were commonplace in hunter duels. Previously, Yuzuki might have intervened, but alas, she was no longer there. He brazenly added that if he were to perish, he would become the second casualty in their squad. Horo reminisced about how charming Akira was, causing Takashi to react with irritation, his eagerness for a fierce contest palpable. Hiro's anger simmered beneath the surface as he listened to their banter. He asserted that it would be prudent for both to abandon their restraint. The atmosphere in the stadium charged with energy, the crowd erupted in cheers while the referee stood between them. Hiro's gaze burned intensely into Takashi, who reveled in his mockery, declaring this was the day he would fight seriously. He proclaimed that if he performed well in front of the inspectors, a promising future awaited him. Dropping his wooden stick nonchalantly, he caught Hiro off guard, leading him to ponder the absurdity of his actions. Exhaling deeply, Takashi revealed that as a mere F rank, there was no merit in defeating him with a sword, opting to conjure flames instead. Surrounding himself with fiery magic, he prepared to unleash an onslaught, showcasing his rare ability to wield both sword and sorcery, despite the difficulty it posed. The arena was set ablaze, a spectacle of power and anticipation. A warrior imbued with magic, a spectacle most uncommon, wouldn't you agree? Herod fixated on him, horror creeping into his realization. In that moment of dread, he opted to conceal his own prowess, leaving his foe to perish within the confines of that dungeon. Offended and incensed, he thrust forth his hand, declaring his intent to wield magic. A radiant aura enveloped him, and Takaki, his counterpart, trembled, clutching a small orb as fury ignited within him. Was this fool mocking him? An ordinary F rank, this Frank, dared to challenge him? A dark circle manifested beneath Herod's feet, starkly contrasting the grand labyrinth's sights, rendering him merely an insect in Herod's eyes. Indifferent to Takaki's plight, he basked in dark magic and crackling lightning, his powers surging with ferocity. Streams of energy spiraled upward, a cacophony resonating from their tumultuous dance. A sparkling orb of magic materialized in Herod's palm, and the spectators, aghast, murmured disbelief. How could an F-rank conjure magic of such caliber? Takaki, bewildered, felt fear coil around him as he spun, demanding to know the origin of this newfound power. Yet, steeling himself, he resolved to retaliate, casting a fireball with fervor, proclaiming Herod would be incinerated. Before him loomed a towering pillar of dark magic and lightning, and with a flick of the system, he gained the ability to wield fire. Behold the flash of hellfire! Herod intoned, unleashing a torrent of energy that coalesced into a vibrant sphere aimed at Takaki. The latter froze, a scream of terror escaping him. With a mere gesture, Herod redirected the fiery projectile, grazing Takaki's face, leaving him slightly singed. The referee ducked as a mighty wave of magic cascaded towards the stands, resulting in a thunderous explosion that obscured everything in a veil of smoke and lightning. Takaki screamed in abject horror. Initially, the audience sat in stunned silence, but soon erupted into cheers, their applause echoing through the arena. Academy officials scrambled, contacting their superiors. One teacher, astonished, speculated that what she witnessed was not third-tier but indeed fourth-tier magic. Confusion reigned, for last year it was Yuzuki, and now it was him, Herod, the remarkable talent of this year. Herod, his mind adrift, recalled the day he unleashed the Hellfire Flash, sprawled wearily on his bed, mindlessly watching television. He had resolved to enroll in the same academy as Yuzuki. A sudden influx of funds had altered the trajectory of his life. In a dream, he emerged from a realm of pure, radiant matter, his form reconstructed from something as pristine as the sky itself, only to confront a dark, chained creature, the Demon Lord. This being, cloaked in chains and shadowy sorcery, regarded him with astonishment. In return, the confident Demon Lord scrutinized him, and then Herod awoke, startled by a notification on his phone. The system informed him of his designation as a Demon Lord, unveiling new features in the Lord's application, and a dire countdown began. A special event, a hunt for the Demon Lord, was imminent. Peering at the screen, he noted the time remaining, a mere 35 hours and 59 minutes until his demise.